Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my Crochet Among Us character. In this part, we are going to be focusing on the eye, so I'll let you know what you'll need in the next couple of clips. I'll be using a 4.5mm crochet hook, a threading needle for yarn and a stitch marker, scissors, stuffing or fiberfill. I'll also be using the Big Twist Value yarn in the color Soft Gray. I have a white yarn from Karen's 1 pound yarn, and I'm not sure where this black is from, but this is a weight of 4 yarn. We're going to start off with our gray yarn, and we're going to do round 1 by creating a magic circle. So our magic circle, let's just take our gray yarn, and then we're going to wrap it around our fingers to create this X, and then we're going to take our crochet hook. You're going to go inside the circle, and we're going to grab this front yarn and pull it through, and then I just twist it up, and then with this yarn here I'm going to go under and grab it to pull it through the loop, and then I'll let go, and we have this circle here. This yarn right here can be pulled so you can tighten up the circle, and this is your magic circle. Now we need to single crochet 6 times into our circle. So when you're going into your circle, you want to go around this yarn and the circle as well. So let's first go inside the circle, grab this yarn, pull it through. This is just a single crochet, so this is our 2 loops, yarn over and pull through both loops. So that was 1 single crochet. Now because you've already followed the first part of this video, we should already know how to do a single crochet. So I'm going to speed forward the rest of this, so I'll do 5 more single crochets and then I'll be back. I just finished my 6 single crochets, so now I'm going to tighten up the circle. And then I'm going to add my stitch marker into the last stitch. So I'm just going to remove my hook, take my stitch marker, and that is the end of round 1. We now have our 6 single crochets and we can move on to round 2. For round 2, we're going to increase into the next 2 stitches. So this first one here and this one, we're going to do 2 single crochets in each of those. So going into my first one, that's 1 single crochet and then another into that same stitch. Now going into the second stitch, I'm doing the same thing by doing another increase. So that's 1 and 2. Next, we're going to single crochet into the next stitch. So this one here. Now we're going to repeat that one more time. So an increase, and a single crochet. So here it is. 1 single crochet, another one. Into my next stitch, I have to do another increase. And then at the stitch marker, I'm going to remove it to do 1 single crochet, and I should now have 10 stitches in round 2. For round 3, let's single crochet into the first stitch. So here's my first stitch. I'm just going to do 1 single crochet. And now I'm going to increase into the next 3 stitches. So this one, and this one, I'll do an increase. So that's 1, 2. I have to do that again. That was 1, 2, and then my last increase into the third one. So what we just did was 1 single crochet and then an increase into the next 3 stitches. Now we're going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So 1, 2, we're just doing 1 single crochet in each of those. So that was 1, 2. Okay, next we're going to increase into the next 3 stitches. So basically 1, 2, 3, at your stitch marker, we're just going to do a single crochet. So let's do our increase. It's 1, 2, going into my next stitch for another increase. 1 and 2. And then into the next one, I'm going to do another increase That was 1 and 2. Then at your stitch marker, let's remove it and do 1 single crochet. Now after you do this single crochet, you can put your stitch marker back in, and we should now have 16 stitches in total for round 3. Round 4, let's start off with single crocheting into the next 2 stitches. So this one and this one, we're just doing 1 single crochet in each of those. So that was 1, going into the next stitch for 1 more single crochet. Now we're going to increase into the next 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's increase into each of those. So this is my first one, my second one. Remember, we're doing increases, so 2 single crochets in each of those. My third one, my fourth one. Again, it just increases. And my last increase into the 5th one. Now let's single crochet into the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. 1 single crochet, going into the next stitch for 1 more single crochet, and in the next stitch we're doing another single crochet. Okay, so now we just have to increase into the next 5 stitches. So we're doing the 5 increase again into each of these. At the stitch marker, we're just going to do 1 single crochet. So let's just increase until we get to the stitch marker. So I did my first increase, going to the next one for my second increase, my third, fourth, and my fifth. And then at the stitch marker, I'm just going to single crochet that, and I'll put my stitch marker back in. For round 4, you should have 26 stitches in total. Now let's move on to round 5. Round 5, we're starting off by single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Remember, we're just single crocheting right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're going to increase into the next 4 stitches. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm doing all increases into them. So doing my first, going into my second one for another increase. This is 2 single crochets into each stitch. Going into my third one now for another increase. There goes 1 stitch or another single crochet, and then I have to do my last increase into the 4th. 1 and 2. Now we're going to single crochet into the next 8 stitches. So it might be a little bit hard to see because it's kind of tight now. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so now we're going to increase into the next 5 stitches. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm doing all increases right now. So 2 single crochets into each. I just did my first one, going in for my second one, my third increase right now, going in for my 4th increase, So 2 single crochets. Then I'm going into my last one for another increase. That was 1 single crochet and 2 into that same stitch. So for the remainder 4, we're just going to single crochet into each of those, and at the end you should have 35 stitches in round 5. So I just did my first single crochet, my second, my third. I'll remove my stitch marker and do my last, and I'll now have 35 stitches. For rounds 6, 7, and 8, I won't show that on camera because they are all just single crochets, which means you will end up with 35 stitches in each of those rounds because we are not changing anything, we're just creating the length of the eye. So just do a single crochet in each of those rounds and then I'll be back. Remember, it's rounds 6, 7, and 8 that you're doing all single crochets in each of those rounds. I just finished round 6 of my single crochets and it does curve up a bit, so I wanted to show you what it looks like. But if it does curve up, all you have to do is just kind of stretch it downward. This is of course going to be the outside and this is the inside where the original magic circle was. So you're going to just curve it down a bit, and then when you do round 7 and 8, it should have a little length right there, and then after that we'll do 1 row of black. I just finished round 7 and as you can see, it slightly curves down a bit. It's still kind of flat, but after we finish round 8, it should go down a little bit more. And when you do round 8, crochet it a little bit tighter so it can start to curve down a little bit more. After round 8, this is what the eye currently looks like. And now we can close up the stitch before we attach the black yarn. So what you're going to do is just cut off some yarn, leave a little bit so we can adjust the eye right here. So you're gonna, after you cut it off, just pull out your yarn and then grab your needle and insert your yarn into the needle. Now after you insert your yarn into the needle, what we're going to do is insert your needle through the stitch that comes right after where your yarn is, and then just push it through. Next, you're going to go into the stitch that was before it. So this is the one we just inserted into. We're going to go into this stitch right here, and you're going to go into the middles of the stitch and just push it back. Pull it out like that, and then just pull it tight. And then we're going to attach our black yarn now. So what we just did is, and I think it's called an invisible closure or something like that, and we're just going to attach our black yarn into this stitch. We can insert it into any stitch because it doesn't really matter, but let me get my black yarn now. I have my black yarn and I'm actually not going to attach it where I said it originally was. I'm going to put it more on the side right here. Again, it doesn't really matter where you put it, but I just want to put it on the side. I'll put it into this one. And then I'm going to take my yarn and pull the black yarn through, and then I'm just going to tie a knot, a normal knot. And now I'll start my single crochets. Okay, so my black yarn has like all these fuzzy things, so ignore that. But what you're going to do now is just take your hook and go into that stitch where you already have the yarn attached, and then you're going to pull the black yarn through and then just chain 1. So a chain is yarning over your hook and pulling through, and now you're just going to single crochet until you make it back up to this stitch. So single crochet, just going in, there's the 2 loops, yarning over and pulling through. So I'll continue single crocheting until I get back to the side. Okay, so I made it to the part where I did the invisible closure, and you can see this yarn here where that closure was. If I pull on it, you can see that it gets smaller. So don't single crochet into that because that's not our stitch. You want to go into the one that's after that. So this one here for me. And now I'm just going to continue my single crochets until I make it back to this stitch right here. Okay, so I made it back to where that last stitch was, and now where I attached the yarn and I did the chain 1, I'm just going to single crochet into that same stitch. So I'm just going into this one where the yarn was attached, the black yarn, and I'll do 1 single crochet. So that is the end of our black row, and what we can do now is we're going to cut off the yarn. This one has so much fallout. And then I'm just going to cut off, you have to cut off excess because we are using this yarn to sew it to our body. So I'm gonna cut about this much. I'm just guesstimating. And then you can just take your yarn and pull it straight out. And let's attach our white yarn now. Before I show you how to attach the white yarn, I want to show you this eye really quick. So you can see that this yarn, the black one where I last left off, I'm going to make that the bottom of my eye. And I do also like to stretch it out a bit because I feel like his eye is like a little bit longer than what I made it. But when you sew it, you can also adjust that as well. So now that I said this is the bottom of my eye, that means I'm going to attach the white right here. You can attach your white anywhere you want, but I'm going to put mine like right at this corner right here. So now let me get my white yarn and my threading needle. Okay, so I've already attached my white yarn to my threading needle, and now what I'm going to do is determine the placement. So like I said, I wanted to go from here to here, and I'm just going to go in from the back and just push it through to see where I want it. I want it there, and then I'm just going to pull it through, and then you're just going to go back in and out. So since I put it there, I'm gonna go here and push it back in. And then I kind of just try to make it as thick as I can. So you can go back and forth into like the same stitches. So I'm going back into that same stitch before. I'm just going around this ridge right here. I don't know how long I'm gonna make it yet. I have to see how it looks. I'm going to speed this part up a little bit because it's just sewing back and forth. And you kind of just try to want to cover the gray gaps. But okay, so now I'm going to speed this up a bit because I'm just going in and out with the white. So after I weaved it in and out a bit, this is what it looks like. If you want yours a little bit thicker or longer, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to stop here, and now I'm just going to cut my white yarn. The one that's this one right here. And then I'm just going to tie the pieces together just to make it secure. I'm not going to cut off the yarn because I'm going to use it as stuffing. So it might seem a little bit messy, but I'm just going to use that as my excess stuffing. And then after we do that, we can now sew it on to the body. Okay, I'm going to try to show this as best as I can with all the space I have. But what we're first going to do is just find where you want it to be placed. So okay, so I found where I want my eye, and I want it just like this. So what I'm going to do now is get this yarn out of my way, and I'm going to line up this bottom with a row of stitches where I find my placement. So like I said, I want mine right here, and this lines up with this row right here. So this is the row that I'm going to sew it onto. So I'm going to take my yarn and insert it into this stitch. Okay, so you see what I just did there? I'm working with this row, and I just insert my needle, and I'm going to pull the yarn through. So after I do that, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to insert it into one of the stitches right here. And now I'm just pulling it out. Okay, so let me continue doing that. You see, I'm going into the next stitch and I'm doing the same thing. So I just went in like that. We're just doing this straight line. Now I'm going into a stitch on the eye. There I have it, just pulling it out. Let's do that again. Going into the next stitch. That's what it looks like. Pulling it straight out. Going into the stitch on the eye. And now you have to constantly check your placement and how it looks, because if you want it to be more round, you know, you would have it out like this and you'll just follow the curve of the eye. But if you want it more straight to follow the line, which is what I'm doing, I'm going to follow this. I'm going to continue going in this row, and then once it curves, I'll go up as well. So I'll show this one more time. I'm going into that stitch right there, pulling it straight out, and then I'll go back into the stitch on the eye, insert my needle through, and pull it. Okay, so I'm gonna finish a couple off camera because it's a little bit difficult right now, but I'll come back to show you how I do the curve. Okay, so I feel like I put my eye a little bit too high, so what I'm going to do is just remove all of what I just sewed, and I'm just going to move it down one row. So I'm basically going to do the same thing, but I'm just on here to let you know that if you don't like the placement, it's okay to take it off and do it again. I know it's kind of stressful because this is a lot of work, but I'm just going to take this out and I'm going to move it to this row. I won't show this on camera because it's literally the same thing. I'm just changing the placement. Like, I don't want it too high like this. I'm like, it's too close to the head. That's what I felt. So anyways, I'm going to move it down a little bit and then I'll be back. I adjusted the eye, I just put it one row lower, and now I made it to a curve. So what I'm going to do here, it's basically the same thing. You just have to push it up a little bit. So I'm at this curve right here. This is where I last put in my weave. So I'm going to go weave into this one. I went under and then I'm pushing it up. So before I was going straight this way, now I'm just pushing it up that way. Going in. And now I have to find my stitch I'm putting it into, just that guy there, and then just pulling it back out. So remember, every time you do a little stitch, you just want to make sure it's lining up so you don't have to constantly fix it like I do. But now I'm just going to finish sticking on the eye. Now once you make it to about here or wherever you're getting close enough to it being closed, you do want to stuff it a bit. So I'm not stuffing it yet because I haven't made it to that point, but let me just show you one more. So since I'm going up, I want to follow this line here. I'm gonna go into this one now. I'm going up, and then pushing it out into the black stitch, and now I'll finish it until I get halfway so I can show you how to stuff it. So once you make it to the top, I'm following this line. So I'm following the same steps I showed you here. It's just that when you do this line, it's going to be a little bit hard because when you lay it flat like this, you can see it's more circular, but I don't want my eye to be circular. So I'm just trying to adjust it to fit this row right here. So you can see I already did some. So I'm following this row, and I know it's going to be a little bit difficult because it does curve, but if you wanted to curve, that's fine. But I'm just going to do a straight row, and then I'll go back to the curve on this side, which is what I showed you here. So I'm almost done sewing it. I have this much room left. So now I'm just going to take some stuffing and excess yarn that I have, and I'm just going to push it inside. You can stuff it how much you want, but I don't want to put too much. So I'm just going to add a little bit at a time. And then when I close it up a little bit more, I'll add some more at the end right here. Hey guys, so I made it towards the end and I'm back to where my original stitch was. I'm going to do one last stitch on this side. So still the same thing I originally showed you, just going into a stitch. And this time when I pull it, you see how my thumb has this yarn. I'm not going to let that yarn go through. So you can see I pulled this side out. Now I'm going to take my threading needle and go inside this circle. And we secure it that way. And then what you can do is just take your needle and push it inside your project, and you can just go out anywhere. Hey guys, so this is me editing, and I just wanted to mention that what I just showed you was I went in and then I went into the top here with my needle. I suggest not doing that because you don't want this hole to open any bigger. Mine didn't, but just in case, I suggest you actually push your needle through the middle over to the black side, and then when you pull out the black side, you can stuff it back in on this side. That way you're not going to see any openings on the top part. We're just stuffing this back in. So now you can take your threading needle and push the black yarn back in. You can cut it off if you want, but I'm using this as more stuffing. Oh wait, you know what, this yarn actually, yeah, no, let me push it in. I was gonna say if I do this, the fuzzies might pop out onto the gray yarn, But yeah, I'm just going to finish stuffing this back in. It's going to take a while because I'm using my threading needle, but once I'm done doing this, I will be back. I just finished attaching my eyes, so we are now done with part 2. I'll see you guys in part 3 of our Among Us crochet tutorial, and in part 3 we're going to be making the leaf for the top and then our crochet backpack.